Asylum. Sally made good on her threat. The Supreme Court of Justice found me guilty for the 3 murders charged against me. My whole life went down the crapper before I could say I'm innocent. I was framed. Headlines in the news nationwide read, "Crazed daughter snapped." Teenage girl Stephanie Ray Collins turned serial killer, leaving a trail of murders. Despite my protest of innocence, somehow the state had hard evidence against me. If you ask me, they pulled it out of a rabbit's ass. According to the state's officials leading this witch trial, it was an open and shut case. I pleaded no contest to the charges by the advice of my crappy attorney, Bernard Valdez. He promised if I didn't fight the charges, Judge Xavier Lamott would show me mercy and likely give me a lesser sentence. I took his word for it against my better judgment, and I fell right into the devil's hands. As ironic as it sounded, the prosecution claimed that luck was on my side. Under the circumstances, living with an insane parent who murdered my father, the court-appointed psychiatrist, Janet Dubrow, deemed me as someone who snapped. A crime of passion, if you will. As my fate fell into unrelenting hands of the officials, the state's prosecution charged me as a juvenile for the murder of my mother's boyfriend, Charles Dodson. The judicial system finding a 10-year-old child capable of committing such a heinous crime, slicing open a grown man's throat from ear to ear, was inconceivable to me. Charles stood a firm 6'4" and weighed over 200 pounds. The crime they charged against me was an impossibility. A child weighing less than 100 pounds and less than half his height could not have carried out such a forceful assault. After 8 years, the evidence miraculously appeared out of thin air. The state's argument seemed weak and unrealistic. However, the prosecution claimed they had damaging evidence against me. All their claims were based in fairyland. The national news headline read that the police found a bag of my bloody clothes and a knife with my fingerprints, stuffed away in Sarah's closet. When I unpacked her closet, I didn't come across any such bag. The bag simply didn't exist. At this point, I knew the due process I'd read about was not in the cards for me. Justice had left the building, and I had to fight the devil alone. Any imperative clue proving my innocence slipped past their dirty noses. My attorney, Bernard Valdez, the state prosecution, Laurent Marco, and Judge Lamott ignored the fact that at the time of Charles's death, I was at school sitting in plain sight, first row. These outstanding pillars of society turned the other cheek and ignored anything that would have cleared my name. Apart from Edward Van Dunn, Aidan's uncle, I reckoned several members of the Illuminati were aiming for me. The hardest one of all to swallow was my mom, Sarah, playing a part in this atrocity. She had no problem keeping a crypt of secrets from me, but the idea that money was the fuel that flamed her motivation sent me reeling. My stomach churned with bitterness every time I wondered how easy it was for my own mother to throw me to the wolves for a few coins. Unfortunately for Sarah, her diabolical plan didn't save her life. She had died before she'd gotten the chance to wallow in her wealth. For the murders of Frances Bonnell and Sarah Collins, my mother, I got off with an insanity plea. It could have been worse, and knowing that little fact seemed to soothe the nightmare somewhat. The federal judge sentenced me with no chance of parole to live the remainder of my life at Haven Hospital, located on the outskirts of Bayou La Rose, an asylum for the violent and criminally insane. I was the youngest in history labeled a serial killer, the second woman charged as such. The first woman received the gas chamber. I suppose luck had my back in a very wacko way. Then, unexpectedly, a dark cloud was lifted, and my nightmare ceased. Or so it seemed. On my 21st birthday, the U.S. Court of Appeals, the Fifth Circuit, overturned my conviction. I was exonerated of all charges. A release order was set in motion, granting my freedom. All charges were mysteriously dropped. Though I knew better than anyone it was a crock of shit, but I'd take it to get out of this hellhole. It was an early spring morning when the doors of the reformatory opened. A cool breeze tousled my tangled hair. The sun peaked just above the horizon. I hadn't had a whiff of fresh air or a glimpse of the golden sun in 3 long years. I inhaled the fresh air and savored the sweet taste of honey. I had no idea where I was going. There was no one to call. I was alone and abandoned, but I didn't care. I was free.